has any work been done with paramedics? And I ask because they are a group of individuals that face probably, could be argued, the highest level of trauma in a stressful situation. So they are being treated as a separate class, particular care and attention, or are we taking a different approach?
I might just start to say that I believe all of the state ambulance services are taking this matter very seriously. Obviously the states and territories employ the paramedics, and I know from my knowledge in Victoria that they've invested very significantly in crisis management, PTSD management, trauma support in their service, and I'd be pretty confident most other states are doing the same. I don't know whether Mr.
No, I think that's exactly... Look, primarily that's the state government responsibility, but for example, in response to the bushfires in those regions, we provided funding to support the mental health needs of first responders. Similarly, the mental health to support the mental health needs of frontline healthcare workers through a number of initiatives during the COVID period as well. So primarily that support is provided through state governments, but where we do have funding for frontline responders, generally we don't preclude state government employees from participating in those programs.
I appreciate it from a service delivery perspective, but I'm also asking from a point of view of data collection and research and perhaps development of a national response across the states.
So I'm not aware of...
Senator, I think in part we obviously work closely with the states and territories, and part of the National Suicide Prevention Agreement will obviously look at key cohorts. Primarily a state and territory issue, as Mr Rodham has alluded to, but certainly very alive to the impact of distress and frontline workers across the board. We're certainly... Mr Rodham mentioned the bushfire response. Certainly Emergency Management Australia has been doing some work around PTSD, and particularly with Phoenix Australia. So very aware of frontline workers and the impacts of particularly dealing with crises and dealing with distress have on them.
Well, do you have any role in taking the learnings from dealing with veterans and bringing that across to applying to emergency service workers? What's interesting me is that I understand the focus on veterans because they are a Commonwealth responsibility, but the reality is that post-traumatic stress and the causes of it can have some correlation to life as a paramedic.
So, once again, Senator, particularly working between Department of Veterans Affairs and Home Affairs, where they're responsible for Emergency Management Australia, but also looking at the broader issues around post-traumatic stress disorder across the board and frontline workers. We are looking at that holistically through whole of government IDC processes.
So I can have some confidence that the learnings of the Department for Veterans is going to find its way to a state minister.
We work very closely, and PTSD is a key focus, particularly for states and territories.
And there's an intergovernmental forum in relation to response to disasters, etc. So that's one example where I know that that the Bushfire Recovery Agency is working with colleagues in states and territories in terms of supporting first responders and learning the lessons of the bushfire season in 2019-20 in that area particularly.
But it also can be a reverse. I mean, given paramedics deal with trauma every day and go home, obviously learnings from their treatment for veterans.
Yes. And in fact, in the bushfire context, we also considered, those impacts for example, for GPs and for pharmacists working in those areas. So absolutely learnings both ways.